Sweet. All right, so this is technically the last part, at least for this project. And as you guys know, in part 1 and part 2, we were essentially talking about drawings. Obviously how to get them into Photoshop and kind of that workflow. But another thing that we have available at SAC is really unique, I think, especially in this age of AI and a lot of people kind of scared about something like with AI and that it's connected to the internet and it's stealing from artists, and that's not always the case, and that's not always true. In fact, there's many companies that, such as like Nvidia, that are producing AI all within their graphics card. So what's really nice is if you have an RTX card, keep in mind, like, you have to check. Most people, you might have an AMD card or Apple Silicon. Those won't work for about what I'm about to show you here. However, the program itself is called Canvas Beta. It is entirely free, and I was able to install it on all of these new computers. So all of the new computers are able to do at least what I'm about to show you here. However, the one specific thing I also wanted to show was the Wacom tablet and how you use it. Essentially, if you want to use it, you can get a pen from me, and the code is on Miro, so you're more than welcome to, of course, obtain that yourself. One thing I would say is I will hunt you down and find you if you accidentally take this pen with you. However, the good news, if you want to invest in yourself, it does cost less than $50, which, by the way, so does like a set of 5 markers these days. So to me, it's actually fairly affordable. In that sense, what's nice about it is, well, I'm going to do a demonstration of how we can. You may remember in part 2, I basically went to Google search. I came up with a bunch of other images, and I kind of mix and match. And I would say traditionally that is what we used to do in the past. And to be fair, now we have this wonderful Canvas system that, well, essentially if you hit new, there's even a couple of options. We can do a landscape view or just a standard square. In my case, it defaults into this kind of space background. So a couple of things I wanted to show you was not only this Wacom tablet, so I'll kind of go back and forth between the tools and things that we can obviously use. First things first, one thing I would say about this screen is it's very expensive. It's literally $4,500, and it's for a good reason. It is a touch screen. It is a massive 27 inches, and it's really adjustable. You'll notice actually in the back there's this slider. If you kind of want to get that in the video, there's a slider in the back, essentially locking it and unlocking it, right? So if you've ever like tried to move this and noticed it's like a struggle, please stop moving it, because it shouldn't be a struggle. In fact, make sure that you unlock it, press it down. In fact, if you have a wireless mouse, it'll do that. But you can also use it as a drafting table. Right? You don't necessarily have to stay in a sitting mode, And another thing to be aware of is it is touch sensitive, so you can control that with a switch in the back, and I'll kind of point that out as well. So you do have these switches on the back. Of course, the slider changes the touch control. You have your power button, and honestly, this button just changes other settings about the screen that you don't really need to adjust. Again, it's more like a game controller. You'll notice there's like an R2 and L2 buttons, right? And those are actually completely customizable. You also have 2 right here. For the most part, the default, and I'll show you what they are on the screen, but you can change them, and you can change them per program. So if you want to edit undo button, instead of doing Control Z all the time, you can just edit undo, right? It's usually the default in many cases. However, you can set those buttons to essentially do everything. In my case at home, I have the exact same screen. I use this one for undo and shift, because I hold shift a lot while I draw, so I can do straight lines, which of course you'll see a little bit of today. But again, get it into a position that's comfortable, guys. I mean, there's no reason why we have to reduce comfort. So once you got it in the spot, of course, lock it into place and you're good to go, right? But again, if you notice it's struggling and you'll end up lifting the whole thing, please don't do that. Obviously, unlock it first. Couple things about the pen itself. You'll notice it has an eraser, and yes, the eraser does work too. Not specifically in this program, but you'll notice it picks up on this side and this side. Keep in mind it is a pretty strong screen, but it's not strong enough against your metal graphic scales. For the love of God, you may have noticed, if you had a metal graphic scale, I've been literally telling you, get them away from this computer because it will scratch. However, if it is plastic and at least under the hardness of 6, it does pretty well. In fact, even with like your fingernails, it won't scratch or anything like that. Another thing to notice in that box where you find the pins is also a bunch of micro cloths, right? That goes without saying. Do not clean the screen with a paper towel, period. Do not get any water on it. In fact, it doesn't need anything. It's kind of a very special film. And it, you know, same thing with your glasses. You wouldn't use a paper towel to wipe your glasses. Don't use a paper towel to, of course, wipe this off. However, at SAC, we're pretty clean, but you'll notice, yeah, there's some oily bits and pieces from, of course, moving the screen like that. Not a big deal. It's not going to affect much, but again, don't just try to like clean the screen with your shirt or anything. It's a very fine woven screen, so anything like that's very fibrous will definitely scratch it. But in this case, we do have this really special tool, which, by the way, I was showing Natalie earlier. But you can change some things, and very often we use Google Images to find stuff. But I think it's a little bit more important if it comes from us and we make it ourselves. And it's literally not AI that's connected to ChatGPT or any large language model. In fact, it's completely within the graphics card itself. And you'll see we have a couple of base options. So for instance, maybe I want a daytime scene with what I was doing in my elevation last time. Maybe I want a couple of different variations. So I can definitely start off with an easier base, right? Maybe something like that. And in my case, I can start off with a couple of clouds, maybe a heart or two. In my case, let's make sure I got a paintbrush. There we go. But as you can see, it's going to start to generate some things. Right. So for instance, if I start making clouds, in fact, it's actually going to start making clouds. And I can even draw on this side as well. And the AI is basically going to start to produce what I want. So if I want an actual cloud setting, I can. Another thing, we got mountains. So I'm gonna get a little, Bob Ross on us. Put a couple mountains in there. I can draw the rest of that in. Don't get me wrong, I don't have to sit here all day and do that. So let's get a bigger tool. And don't get me wrong, this is a very basic tutorial. I'd love to see where you guys take this, truly. But that's really cool. I mean, shoot, I didn't have to do Google search or anything. And in fact, if I want 2 mountains, especially if my site calls for 2 mountains, or I have a cityscape, I can't really add any cities yet. To be fair, it is a beta. And hopefully this will be getting better and better. But keep in mind, we gotta still go Bob Ross about it. We still gotta go with the background elements first. That way we can get the clouds behind the mountains, essentially, and some of those things. However, if I want another mountain, let's get it in there, right? If I said that scene was not the exact variation I want, I can still change variations. All right, so something that would take normally 30 seconds for ChatGPT is honestly within seconds, microseconds actually. And to be fair, I can still change the scene as well. So maybe a green scene, maybe it's a night scene, those kinds of things. And again, way better than Google Images and arguably even faster. Another thing I could do is start to add water. Maybe I need some water in there, kind of Bob Ross style. And just like that, I have my own scene, right? Of course, now I can save this and use it to put my architecture in it. However, this is more like looking off of a cliff, so maybe I don't necessarily need water. Maybe I actually need some grass. And put it very close in the foreground, right? Obviously putting my architecture there, or forcing it back a little bit. Right, and letting it become the background. So again, what's really nice about this is now I don't even have to use the plagiarism styles of Google Images. And don't get me wrong, it's not really plagiarism because we do edit it so much in Photoshop. However, nicely enough, now I can take this, file save. So save it, and of course turn it not into a Canvas file. You can save it very similar to like a Photoshop file. But in our case, we need to export it. So let's find the export button. There it is. Export, and let's turn it into something that is at least doable. We can actually turn it into a PSD file, which is really nice because it's going to turn these actually into separate layers for us. So potentially you could sketch something in Photoshop too and bring it into this program, and it's going to do the exact same thing based on this color set. All right, so very similar to like a laser cutter. Red equaling cut, blue equaling score. These very special colors, of course, actually attribute to this program as well. Honestly, I don't know what the other 16 million colors are doing, but at least this color set is doing that. So for that, I'm gonna just do a PNG because I don't really need the Photoshop file today. So, and go ahead and, of course, name it, put test background file. And I could even start to get a couple for my professor, right? I could say, well, there's test image number 1, there's test image number 2, image number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, shoot, you can get a snow scene going on. It's pretty insane. Another thing that's pretty nice is you can also get the trees and other elements, especially if you were going for a really realistic situation. I'm liking that one. Don't get me wrong, it does start to look a little weird and doesn't always work, but you, again, test it, work with it. And you'll notice we have other things like stone wall. So maybe we have, obviously we can add some different things to that as well. I think it's pretty cool, right, to say the very least. It looks like I'm needing some more clouds, but that's just me. Yeah, maybe some fluffiness. What is that? Sky. Okay. Changes the sky a little bit, not too much. Obviously, it's that same layer as the sky that it started off with. What's that do? Yeah. But again, it's just something you can kind of test, right? If you need some water, those kinds of things. But again, an excellent tool that arguably not a lot of schools have. So again, just a small demonstration of that. Any questions about this?
Can you change the thickness of those?
Absolutely. So mine was like super thick.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can definitely change the thickness. It's not great, you know, it's not like Photoshop where I can just kind of right click. But yeah, you can definitely change that to a very fine, and arguably it's not that fine, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. And of course, you can't really edit undo too much. In fact, you'll see that it only goes back so far. And again, it's because it's using a lot of memory and a lot of stuff. So very often I end up just having to make a new one. Panorama is pretty cool, same thing, except it makes a full 360 view for you, which can be really useful. Can you guys remember a place where you saw this in this class? The 3-dimensional environments that we upload into Rhino. You can literally make your own environment and then upload it to Rhino, right? You can make your own environment. It could be quite literally anything, especially if it's dark or light. And you'll notice this one takes a hell of a lot longer, and it's because it's, of course, producing an entire 360 image. So just keep that in mind. We got some options now, right? We definitely have some tools and abilities. In terms of Wacom settings, you may notice this Space Mouse definitely causes some other settings. To be fair, I've noticed like the click tool not working in Rhino. So, I mean, I would hold off from using the Wacom tool for Rhino for right now. However, with Photoshop and this program, obviously nothing affecting it. But as you can see, if we bring up the tools itself, we can actually move it, and you'll notice there's like some weird things going on. I need to talk to Juan about updating some of the drivers, I think, for all of these, but as of right now, it's working with Photoshop just fine. You'll notice we have a grip pin. That's what we have here. So you'll notice it has like a little test surface, and you'll notice that it's extremely pressure sensitive. If I do it lightly, it's very light. It's also tilt sensitive. So it is probably arguably the closest thing to drawing in a digital realm. If I press hard, it gets harder. However, if you're noticing you just have a harder hand or a softer hand, you might want to dial those in, right? If you notice you got a firm hand, right, you might want to do that, right? But again, this is also where you can change the click. So it really is just like a mouse, this being your basically ultimate clicker, right? Your double button, this right here, right? So your right click. And then this one you can actually set to kind of do whatever you want. Also, there's the eraser tool. However, some people like put the edit undo button on there, and they'll just undo, 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 and switch it back, right, and draw. So it is a game changer, and I would say what's really interesting about it too is you can change it specifically for Photoshop, Illustrator, and honestly any other program that you have. This is also where you can find the express keys I was talking about. So that radial menu, not exactly helpful, but I guess pretty cool. Pin display modifiers, right? So you can do, you know, different pin settings. And again, some of this stuff is not imperative that you absolutely learn it or you're going to be tested on it anytime soon. But again, you might want to use this video for reference to at least remember. Maybe you have a Wacom yourself. To be fair, you can get this model used on eBay for about $1,800, so it's not like out of the realm of possibility, but it is not cheap, right, to say the very least. So it does require a lot of our own responsibility, guys. So again, just to recap, make sure you put the pen back, and of course, you know, be friendly and aware of what's around the screen, right? Goes without saying. We'll end that one for here, and we'll go and switch to Photoshop. Sweet. All right, let's continue. So I'll try to make it as brief as possible. And again, more or less, it really is kind of the same thing of part 2, but just now with a Wacom pen. So again, this screen's a little bit different. It is not a touch screen. I don't recommend using this one. It's just so different. Honestly, I would get used to more either the 27-inch touch or the 27-inch non-touch. This one's just, it just slightly works different. It's got like a weird remote, and you got to charge it all the time. It's a little bit older. It's I guess kind of cool, but anyway, in our case, it works the same, at least for the pen. Same settings and everything like that. Another thing to keep in mind is Wacom uses Windows or Macintosh, which is really nice. So of course, we just saw it on a Windows, and now you're seeing it, of course, on a Mac. In my case, I do need to go over my workflow again. I do want to do a floor plan today, so just to recap that extremely quickly, I'm going to go ahead and open that DWG that I just exported from last time. And again, you can kind of see that I have my mouse hooked up, and I can go back and forth between my mouse and actually just using the pen tool. I have gotten pretty used to a pen tool. However, at first, it can be a really, just very different. So, where did I put it? Floor plan. Let's open that up. Scale to fit artboard. And keep in mind, just to recap a little bit, guys, keep in mind all of these are on 11x17s in portrait. Right, so each floor plan at 1/4 scale is gonna only fit on that 11x17. You only need one section. Arguably, you can go for 2, but you only need 1. Also, the exploded axon. That was a little bit early on in the assignment, right? So don't, of course, forget that one. We're not necessarily doing that in Photoshop. You don't really need to take the axon into Photoshop, right? However, these drawings, you definitely might want to consider it. However, in tandem, just like a crazy instrument, we're using our keyboard and of course our pen tool at the exact same time. You can do this in Illustrator too. Again, it really is just an interface. So, I mean, it's not like anything to be scared of. So as long as you know where everything is, it's arguably, I think, a little bit easier. So in my case, 11 inches, 5, 17, sweet. Oh yeah, I'm actually pretty used to the touch screen. So you do have to go back and forth a little bit. I'll probably go with my mouse on this one just because it'll be a little bit easier. This should hold a pen, but I don't think it does. Oh, okay, there we go. But in my case, I need to line up that 11x17. Hold shift so that it stays scaled and proportional. Lock it in. And good to go. Obviously from there, I do want to just change the line weights and everything like that. However, for today, I'm just going to fake it till I make it. After all, I really just want to show Photoshop. You guys have seen this a million times. So we'll kind of make them all the same for today. And just leave that orange. Obviously, that's not what I want you to do for yours. Please be attentive to line weight and everything like that. In fact, I'm just realizing I don't even want this border. Anyway, not a big deal. Let's take it into Photoshop. So we'll take the whole thing, right, and drag and drop right into Photoshop. In my case, I do want to make sure that I have a new file. In my case, maybe 11x17. So 11, 17. 350 is pretty good, and not too shabby. Go over here and literally just drag that in, turn it into a smart object, and there it is. Of course, it stays at the exact same scale and size as long as that's an 11x17, so not too shabby there. However, more or less, really the kind of same stuff going on. However, if this is a floor plan, I definitely need to be a little bit more attentive to what's going on, and right away it's like, hey, are you sure this needs to be a rasterized object? Totally fine, convert it as a smart object, and of course turn it into a rasterized layer. You'll notice what it does there, of course, is turn it into pixelated dots, right? However, since we're at 3 to 50, it's looking pretty clear, pretty good, right? Of course, going from a vector to a raster image. Now, in my case, I'm kind of actually missing a lot. I just made this Make 2D real quick. So for the lack of, some lines, at least I'll show you how to start to fill this in with the Wacom. Again, not really a lot new here. In my case, I love the Magic Wand tool, and of course selecting things pretty easily. Not too shabby there, but probably the best arguably part about having a Wacom with Photoshop is the brush tool. So if I hit the letter B, I hit the button right click, right? Just as I would on a mouse. Arguably it's a little bit easier. You can download things like DigiSketch, and I would definitely download, and you probably can't see it on the camera. So DigiSketch_brushes, in this case 2021. This comes from a guy on YouTube, and I do have the file, so I'll make that available on Miro. But what's really nice is we have our Micron pens, so our solids. We have pencils, which actually look like pencils. We have markers, miscellaneous. I mean, we could do a dash line for goodness sake, which is pretty awesome. Now, of course, you won't be able to see it unless I actually choose it, but I'm not sure what's going on there. Oh, use a different tool. There we go. But as you can see, we actually have a lot of different tools here, and arguably some are very architectural. I can even just stamp a door and actually have a set of different markers. Another one that I particularly like, and one of my favorites, is the Ghibli set. I don't know if you guys are fans of Ghibli movies, but I definitely am. And maybe I didn't put it on my laptop, it's on my computer at home, my bad. But in my case, we do have general brushes and dry media brushes, wet media brushes. However, if you want more, you can always hit this little plus sign here and actually put some more. You can even make your own, by the way. I'm not gonna go over that necessarily today. However, if you click on this little cog wheel up here, you'll see that we have a couple of more options. In our case, we can make a new brush preset, you can make a new brush group. And in my case, this is also where you can get more brushes. So if you go to get more brushes, what's nice is we have the Adobe Suite, guys. I mean, I would take advantage of that as much as possible because honestly, there is all kinds of brushes. In fact, these are all free with your Adobe account. So again, I think the world is your oysters. And if you're trying to save some money, right, and getting all these markers, pencils, charcoal, all this stuff, I don't know about you, but my hands are clean now from all the charcoal that I do in my drawings now, which is definitely a plus. To be fair, this is also what the industry is using in the real world, especially if you've ever talked to a game designer, if you've ever talked to anybody drawing cars or industrial design, they definitely use a Wacom tablet, right? Because of that incredible sensitivity that it has and that it still feels like a real drawing. A lot of anime people, not an actual person who's an anime person, but people who draw anime, of course, extremely popular with that art form. But as you can see, there's a lot of different brushes, and rightfully so. I mean, you can make your own at home. So of course people do, and they upload them. And to be fair, these are just the official Adobe ones. Honestly, if you just type in free brushes for Photoshop, that's of course how I found actually one that was much more architecturally related. But again, just kind of want to recap on those things. That way, if you are generally interested in the Wacom, that you can actually get started and work with it. It's not a requirement, and by all means, nobody has to know if you used a mouse or a pen. And unfortunately, nobody really will know unless, you can kind of just tell on the sketch marks, what you'll see today. So in my case, I'm gonna make a new layer just to kind of show off some color. In my case, I'm gonna go with a nice red. And I gotta tell you, it's nice picking a color with this kind of precision, right? It is also a true color screen. So again, it's like the color I want is the color that I'm gonna get. And as you can see, it's not doing much right there. So I might need to obviously change my brush. I'm gonna go with something of an architectural brush. And I'm gonna go with a gigantic Micron pen just to kind of show you what that does. And as you can see, it's pretty opaque, and that's because my opacity is at 9%. So obviously I don't want that. But what's really nice is I can sit there and draw it just like I would in any case. However, it's starting to look a little unrealistic and too saturated. Like, let's get a little bit closer to that. But as you can see, it does start to have the imperfections that I talk about, such as, the difference between Toy Story 4 and Toy Story 1 is actually imperfection. you want some of these imperfected things. That is actually what makes our analog drawing so good, is that from a little bit farther away it looks perfect. And there's a lot of science that really goes into the way that we look at things. But anyway, just to kind of recap the tool, definitely useful there. Another way that we can use it is, I use the pencil tool a lot just because it does have that texture. And sometimes that is what I'm going for, right? And I don't have a sharpened pencil, and I just want to get that pencil look. So I definitely can, and get some of those errors involved. And what's nice is if I press harder, it does get a little more harsh. Another thing that's nice is, especially with certain pieces, you know, you can definitely change some things. It has more settings such as the hardness, right? Especially with some of these soft tools. That one's kind of a game changer, right? I can literally make, you know, stencils as well, you know, just like any other brush tool. And don't get me wrong, I mean, you can still use like a click button and do those things, right? But again, just trying to show off the tools, not necessarily doing something that you should necessarily do for your drawings. But again, I think a game changer, at least in terms of feeling much more connected with this computer and device, which is kind of the goal. And to be arguable, I mean, I could just fill that in. I could save time, right? But especially if I was going for a certain amount of character, I'd want to stay in the right direction. Right? And I could really give it my own hand. In fact, I could even make it, you know, a little off, and really add an unlimited amount of color. Something that, to be fair, as a, you know, growing up a poor kid, you made best of what you had, right? Sometimes you only had like 1 or 2 crowns, and you wanted to make a masterpiece. But for me, it's like a kid in a candy shop that now has just unlimited tools, and I gotta tell you, it's a game changer. It is overwhelming too, but at the same time, I can't even mess up, is the best part. Say I did mess up, I couldn't do that in analog. You know what I mean? I can't just hit edit undo. So holding spacebar, let's go over maybe a couple of other things that are arguably pretty nice to go over. Say I need to get some grass. All right, let's go ahead and do that. Maybe it's around my object in general. Gotta tell you, tracing on the Wacom is the best thing in the world. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm going fast for the sake of tutorial, but yeah, obviously drawing, if you already know how to draw, is quite the game changer. Now, of course, I can right click and of course select the inverse. Ooh. Excellent, there it goes. Gosh, I keep doing that. Select the inverse. Now in my case, I'm gonna start to make some grass basically around this object. And again, I don't wanna be too saturated about it, so I'm gonna start to use maybe a light green, light yellowish. That's something that's more or less the color I want. I'm gonna go and change my brush. So I hit the letter B, change my brush. And I don't know, man, I wish I had my Studio Ghibli ones. Let's try some things out, like, I don't know, crowds, Christmas lights. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have this like dune grass going on. Let's check that out. Not exactly great, but definitely arguably better than, you know, some of the things I see. Let's go with actually a big brush. Let's save some time. Let's go with some maybe kind of fuzzy quality as well. Let's go really big. Let's save some time. Definitely, arguably, I think faster than even some things, but get a little bit of yellow in there. Switch it up a little bit. But again, it's gonna actually match. You'll notice it kind of even has the motion of things. Now, don't get me wrong, if you had an iPad, it's not like something entirely brand new, right? Honestly, the iPad has been doing some of this stuff for a while as well. However, the tilt adjust is pretty much a game changer. Get a little bit of highlight in there. Obviously, kind of like some sunspot, if you will. But again, very familiar, at least in terms of being a painter, right? Cool. But as you can see, I can really start to get a quality out of it. right? I can definitely start to get it a little more analog-like. But again, obviously we can do that in floor plan as well, right? Same tools as, you know, the magic wand and of course the lasso. We have the selection tool, but again, just slightly going over some more brush tools, right, to say the very least. Any major questions coming up here? For the most part, I think it's pretty simple, but sometimes you kind of just need somebody to show you how to use it. That way you can kind of feel if you're giving it too much or not enough, right? Or what's wrong or what's not working. So anyway, no questions? If not, I'll leave it there for today. Sounds good. Thank you guys.